The Severan dynasty remains one of the most vivid episodes in Roman history, marked by dramatic military campaigns, sweeping reforms, and turbulent political intrigues. Today, we embark on an exploration of this fascinating period that stretched from 1987 to 235 AD, a time when the Roman Empire was transformed by emperors whose power was forged on the battlefield. Imagine an empire where the clash of swords and the roar of legions were almost as influential as debates in the Senate. This era blurred the lines between military might and political authority. We will trace the rise of Septimius Severus, examine his bold military adventures against the Parthians, and follow in the footsteps of his successors who pushed the boundaries of power and citizenship. With each phase of the dynasty, from military triumphs to sweeping administrative reforms and fascinating personal rivalries, we get a glimpse of how the empire was reshaped for centuries to come. In this narrative, creativity meets history as we break down complex events into relatable moments and analogies that bring ancient Rome into a light that is accessible and engaging for our modern audience. Septimius Severus emerged from the vibrant city of Leptis Magna in Africa, a place where the Mediterranean world met the bustle of commercial activity and cultural exchange. Born into an equestrian family, he didn't start off as the scion of a long-established aristocracy, but as a man of ambition who clawed his way upward through sheer determination and strategic alliances. Severus's early career was characterized by his work as an advocate of the fiscus, proving his financial acumen and administrative capabilities in a system that was already strained by decades of near-constant political upheaval. His rise to power was not without dramatic twists. After eliminating formidable rivals such as Albinus, Severus secured his position by portraying himself as the adopted son of the revered Marcus Aurelius, an ingenious move that allowed him to adopt the name Antoninus and lend himself an aura of legitimacy and eternal Roman virtue. The political landscape of Rome at that time was evolving into a battlefield where military prowess often translated directly into imperial authority. In a climate where the Senate's influence was waning, Severus's reliance on the support of the soldiers underscored the ascent of a military monarchy. The stage was set when the Parthian king Vologases IV sought to expand his territory by invading Armenia and Mesopotamia, taking advantage of Rome's momentary internal distractions. With the siege of Nisibis gripping the imagination of the empire, Severus was compelled to act decisively. Driving his forces eastward, he not only relieved the beleaguered city, but took the fight directly into enemy soil, launching a counteroffensive that remains legendary today. In a series of bold maneuvers, his legions advanced deep into Parthian territory, leading to the sacking of the famed cities of Seleucia and Ctesiphon in 998 AD. This audacious campaign simultaneously bolstered Rome's eastern front and sent shockwaves through the region. An accord soon followed, under which northern Mesopotamia was ceded to the Roman Empire, where it was reorganized as a highly strategic province governed by an equestrian official rather than a traditional senatorial legate. The campaign was not simply about territorial gains, it was a statement of power. For the soldiers marching at Severus's side, and for the empire as a whole, it meant that Rome could strike deep into enemy lands and emerge victorious, a realization that echoed far beyond the battlefield. Severus's reign was not solely defined by battlefield victories. His transformative reforms altered the very fabric of Roman governance. Recognizing that control over an empire as vast as Rome demanded more than military might, he restructured the government into what can be described as a military monarchy. In an unprecedented shift, Severus disbanded the traditional Praetorian Guard, a body long steeped in Italian tradition, and replaced it with a new elite corps drawn largely from the legions stationed along the turbulent frontiers, particularly the Danubian legions. This change not only provided a more diverse and battle-hardened force, but also signified the diminishing dominance of Italy over military affairs. The choice to appoint equestrian prefects, rather than their senatorial predecessors, to command new legions during the Parthian campaign was a symbolic break from the past, one that reflected a broader strategy to democratize power based on merit and battlefield experience. Further to this, Severus introduced reforms that improved the welfare of his soldiers. Their pay was raised, Legal marriages were permitted even during active service, and paths for centurions to rise into the equestrian order were opened. Back on the home front, Severus maintained a keen focus on Rome's vulnerable frontiers while ensuring the capital itself was secure and well protected. Recognizing that no great empire could flourish without sturdy and well-guarded borders, Severus oversaw improvements to the fortifications along the Rhine and the Danube, forming an unbroken belt of defense against barbarian incursions. Meanwhile, his attention turned to Britain, which was facing renewed threats from the Caledonians. In response, Severus journeyed to the British province, where he reinvented the legacy of Hadrian's earthen wall by reinforcing it with a stone barrier between the Tyne and the Solway. Following the path blazed by Severus, his son Caracalla inherited an empire that was as promising as it was precarious. Beginning his reign alongside his brother Geta, Caracalla's early years were marred by bitter internal discord, a sibling rivalry that eventually culminated in the assassination of Geta. Caracalla's subsequent rule was characterized by a mixture of authoritarian cruelty and ambitious reforms directed at transforming the very essence of what it meant to be Roman. His most far-reaching decree, the Antonian Constitution, 212 AD, remarkably extended Roman citizenship to virtually all free provincials across the empire. This radical step was not merely a symbolic gesture. It was designed to unify the territories under a common legal framework and to expand the tax base, ensuring that every inhabitant contributed to the welfare of the state. At the same time, Caracalla banked heavily on the loyalty of the army, showering his soldiers with increased pay and lavish donatives that guaranteed support even as his personal disposition grew increasingly ruthless. Military campaigns during his reign were not limited to internal power struggles. He also pursued aggressive actions against Germanic tribes, expanding the reach of his influence to the fringes of the empire. The turbulent era following Caracalla's reign saw the emergence of two short but unforgettable rulers, Macrinus and Elagabalus. Macrinus, ascending to power as a non-senatorial man, represented a new type of emperor. His policies were moderate, aiming to restore fiscal balance by abolishing oppressive taxes while negotiating a peace with the Parthians. Despite his sensible approach, his measures to reduce the extravagant payments to the military alienated the soldiers who had grown reliant on such financial rewards. In the ensuing chaos, a young rebel named Bassianus, a distant relative of the Severan line, captured the imagination of the army. In the wake of the instability left by his predecessors, Marcus Aurelius Severus Alexander emerged as a comparatively benign, yet ultimately tragic figure. Ascending to power as a youthful emperor, his reign was initially marked by promise and reform. Under the regency of his determined mother Julia Mamaea, Severus Alexander attempted to restore a measure of senatorial influence and rein in the excesses of the military. His rule saw efforts to impose discipline among the legions and to reduce the ever-escalating military expenditures, which had burdened the treasury for years. His diplomatic ventures in the East were met with mixed success. The rising power of the newly established Sassanid Empire compounded the challenges, with persistent threats along the eastern borders destabilizing an already fragile order. Meanwhile, relentless pressures from the Germanic tribes on the northern front further strained the military and the empire's resources. Alexander's measured policies and attempts at fiscal reform ultimately failed to win over the increasingly restive and powerful Praetorian Guard and other military factions. In 235 AD, discontent among the troops reached a boiling point, leading to a mutiny instigated by Gaius Julius Verus Maximinus. The insurrection ended in tragedy, as both Alexander and his devoted mother were overthrown and killed. The Severi Dynasty's dramatic blend of military conquests, sweeping reforms, and internal strife left an indelible mark on Roman history. Their rule, spanning less than half a century, transformed not only the mechanisms of power, but also the very identity of the empire, a shift that resonated through the corridors of time. By intertwining military prowess with administrative innovation, these emperors redefined citizenship, altered governance structures, and ultimately set the stage for the era of crisis that followed. The legacy of the Severan period serves as a compelling reminder of how ambition, reform, and the unpredictable forces of history can converge to shape the destiny of a civilization.